Today, August 31st, the longest war in the history of United States of America ended in Afghanistan.
Go live to the
Last night in Kabul, the United States ended 20 years of war in Afghanistan, the longest war in American history. Remember why we went to Afghanistan in the first place?
Or another word, do you remember why did we go to Afghanistan in the first place?
Because we were attacked by Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda on September 11th, 2001. And they were based in Afghanistan.
Why this war started? According to Mr. Biden,
We delivered justice to bin Laden on May 2nd, 2011.
that was one reason that we went there, to deliver justice to those committed the 9/11. But that was not the only reason. So let's go back in the history of this war. Let's listen to Mr. Bush, president at the time.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror.
Thousands of lives were ended suddenly at 9/11, 2001.
The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible, and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
Mr. Biden, this was the most important part of that war.
We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
Because Osama and his organization, Al-Qaeda, were not the only ones responsible. Please listen again.
We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
Who committed these terrorist attacks and those who harbored them. Who harbored them? Taliban and Pakistan. So 20 years ago, we went to Afghanistan not only to take justice to Osama, but to take justice to Taliban and to Pakistan, because they were harboring them. So we went. Taliban left Afghanistan in 2 to 3 weeks. Today, after 20 years, we left. Taliban took over again. What was the cost, Mr. President?
2 decades. Yes, the American people should hear this. $300 million a day for 2 decades. If you take the number of 1 trillion, as many say, that's still $150 million a day for 2 decades.
Really? What did we do? We just went there 20 years ago. In 3 weeks, everybody left Afghanistan. Taliban, Al-Qaeda, everybody. We were not able to capture Osama. We were not able to capture Taliban leaders. They all escaped. 10 years later, we finally found Osama close to one of the most important military bases of Pakistan. So for the 10 years or over $1 trillion, what we did, we just found Osama. And then we spend another $1.1 trillion for the next 10 years just to bring the Taliban back. And now, according to Mr. President, Taliban indirectly claims that Taliban are not bad. ISIS is really bad.
Just in the last week, we struck ISIS-K remotely, days after they murdered 13 of our service members and dozens of innocent Afghans.
I'm sure he's talking about the two suicide bombing close to Kabul airport. And in that one, yes, 13 American military people or service members were killed.
13 of our service members and dozens of innocent Afghans.
But Mr. President, close to 200 innocent Afghans died there, not a dozen. So, who did that? According to Mr. President, ISIS did that.
And they did it knowing ISIS-K terrorists, sworn enemies of the Taliban, were lurking in the midst of those crowds.
ISIS is the ghost in Afghanistan. ISIS doesn't exist.
And they did it knowing ISIS-K terrorists, sworn enemies of the Taliban, were lurking in the midst of those crowds.
He wants us to believe that ISIS is the sworn enemy of the Taliban. Even if we say ISIS also is in Afghanistan, the only difference between ISIS and Taliban is the color of the flag. Taliban flag says, La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah, no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger. The background is white, the writing is in black. ISIS flag is black, the writing is in white, and it says the same exact thing. La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah. They share the same mentality. But in Afghanistan, ISIS doesn't exist. For the last 5-6 years, President Ghani was committing all these kind of suicide bombings and blaming the Taliban. And now Taliban are blaming the ISIS. And American officials agree. So when President Joe Biden says that Taliban didn't do it, ISIS did it, then American media picks that. And American media is so huge, powerful, and effective. As soon as they say that ISIS was responsible, the whole world will accept, and they say, oh yeah, Taliban, they're good people. ISIS did it. But anyway, we failed the war in Afghanistan. The only thing we did with $2.2 trillion was just to capture Osama. And that took us 10 years.
Afghanistan, Afghanistan, Afghanistan. Enough already. We wasted 20 years, $2 trillion, numerous American lives, trying to help a country who won't help itself. It's time to blame the people that are responsible. It's the Afghan people. Come on, folks. What the